Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of The Way by Cary Groner. This is a book coming out December 3rd, 2024 from Spiegel and Grau. This is a sci-fi post-apocalyptic book. I received this book from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. So before I get into this, I used to write for this website called post-apocalypticmedia.com. It's sort of stopped updating, but I used to do reviews of books, shows that were highly post-apocalyptic, like Silo, and those that weren't really at all, like The Expanse. Also, given my love of the Fallout, the games, I've played all of them, for millions and millions of hours, and my own post-apocalyptic book, I have had exposure to a lot of the subgenre, and while I've taken a bit of a break from post-apocalyptic stuff this year, I've just written so much of it for the website that I kind of needed like a little bit of a palate cleanser. I still love the genre. As such, I'd say there are three kind of main approaches that come about from the subgenre. You have post-apocalyptic as a warning, post-apocalyptic as a story of survival, usually, one person or like a small group amidst everyone else's struggle, and post-apocalyptic as the interim before society's rebirth, aka hopeful post-apocalyptic. The Stand, I would argue, is a warning novel. The Road is a survival novel, and this book, The Way, is about hope. So what is it about? A post-apocalyptic road trip and a quest for redemption. The world has been ravaged by a lethal virus, and with few exceptions, only the young have survived. Cities and infrastructures have been destroyed, and the natural world has reclaimed the landscape in surprising ways, with herds of wild camels roaming the American West and crocodiles that grow neon green lurking in the rivers. Amidst this perilous backdrop, Will Collins, the de facto caretaker of a Buddhist monastery in Colorado, receives an urgent and mysterious request to deliver a potential cure to a scientist in what was once California. So Will sets out, haunted by dreams of the woman he once loved, in a rusted-out pickup pulled by two mules. A menacing thug is on his tail. Armed militias patrol the roads, and the only way he'll be able to make it is with the help of a clever raven, an opinionated cat, and a tough teenage girl who has learned to survive on her own. So this book is not an action-adventure. There are moments of tension and some violence, but overall it's one of those meditative stories that's meant to have a deeper meaning than pure entertainment. Was I wholly on board for this? I'll get into that. But first, the things I enjoyed. The main character is great. He's a middle-aged man who has accepted this lonely fact and struggles to maintain his ethics in a world with very few. He also has befriended a cat and a bird whom he's able to communicate with. The level he can talk to them I found a bit over the top, a bit too kind of like whimsical. I have no doubt you could train a bird to respond to you or learn to read the cues of a raven and vice versa, as they're very, very smart. And I could talk with my cat when she was around, in that I understood certain pitches to mean different things, and she understood some words that I had, like treats and food. But full-on conversations and the animal's understanding of certain concepts, I was like, I don't know. Still, I liked the cat and the raven characters a lot, as I also did Will. The girl, too, when she arrives, is tough and funny, and the father-daughter sort of bond they develop is very wholesome and nice. The setting, a road trip from Colorado to California, is just awesome. It's my favorite thing about the book. I really enjoy quest novels. I also really enjoy the Southwest of the United States. I just did a road trip from Colorado to Utah. It was from Ontario to Colorado, then to Utah, and then back up to Ontario. But still, the gist of the trip was in that area. I absolutely love it. My favorite place is actually San Rafael Desert in Utah. They didn't go through it in this book, but it's fun when a book takes place in a place that you recognize. I've done a few road trips to Arizona and to Nevada and stuff, so I kind of understand the what it's supposed to look like in the book. I thought it made sense. It kind of brought me back to those road trips, and so I really liked that. One of the other fun things about the book is how the world has kind of been altered since the calamity or the collapse or whatever they're calling it. I can't remember. The blurb mentions the herd of camels running around, but there's also escaped tigers, as we all know from Tiger King. There are lots of tigers in the United States, and so this is kind of like what would happen if no one was there to keep them caged up. Well, they would obviously run rampant. And then because the collapse happened 20 years from now, some genetically mutated animals, like lab experiment animals who have bred and escaped, things like that, have infiltrated the landscape as well. And I thought that was kind of fun. It wasn't to the extent of giant ants or whatever, like from Fallout, or like that kind of thing. But it was just kind of interesting how the animals adapted these kind of experiments that were done on them to their environment, and how they use that to kind of, reclaim their space. I thought that was really interesting. The book also has classic small struggling towns. It has the hermits, it has the abandoned places, all the tropes of post-apocalyptic quest novels. I really enjoyed that aspect. I also enjoyed the commentary about climate change and our self-destructive nature as a species that ran throughout the book. Now, there are two things about the novel that were a little bit less than interesting for me. The first was the plot. The reason for Will going to California has been seen again and again in the subgenre. There's a cure for a virus here, or take the cure here, and all will be well. The Last of Us has the exact same plot, essentially. A slightly different vehicle, but definitely kind of the same idea. Of course, the reason for doing anything in post-apocalyptic novels does tend to be a little limited, and I do enjoy a quest novel. But the reason for the bad guy chasing Will was sort of confusing, and the end result of that was a bit anticlimactic too. Like, the kind of rationale, I was kind of like, oh, like you could have missed it. And I was like, really? So it kind of felt like, I don't know, the ending just didn't really work for me. I also will admit this was because I was kind of over the book by about 80%. There's a lot of philosophizing and soul searching in the novel that I, who only gets even remotely spiritual about the ocean and this desert, found bogged down the story quite a bit and got a little bit preachy. At the end, when I should have been exhilarated for the climax to begin, it felt more like, when you're jogging and you've hit the last bend, and then it turns out that last bend is a 1 kilometer stretch, and you're like, man, that's kind of what I felt with that's kind of what I felt like. I was kind of done with it at that point. There's also references to movies that someone who is 20 years old today most likely would not have seen or heard of. I don't think half the movies that he references people my age would even have heard of, because I watch a lot of movies. I worked in a video store, so I was exposed to a lot of movies. So I don't think that people my age, unless they were super film buffs, would even recognize it. So that felt a little bit out of place. It felt a little bit almost anachronistic. If he'd referenced movies that came out, in the even in the early 2000s or late 90s, movies he enjoyed when he was learning about himself, and that made an impression on him in his late teens, early 20s, that would have been more interesting than talking about Casablanca. Yet, the book has some beautiful writing in it, and the situations behind everything was interesting. I loved the little towns he went to. I loved all of those things. Those things were all unique. There were some interesting ways that he manages to get rid of people who are harassing him without hurting them, because one of his kind of whole tenets is not to harm people. So I thought that was actually an interesting approach. I just found the spiritual or philosophical aspects were a little too heavy-handed. I don't like being preached to. It's one of the things I really don't like. And while I don't mind an allegory or a subtle message in that regard, this book sometimes felt like a Buddhism manual, and that's not really my jam. I mean, in terms of all religions, I'd say Buddhism is one that I would get behind more than any other, but I just don't care. Anyway, I do think if you're interested in those topics, if you love post-apocalyptic stuff, this is a really good one. I thought it was really well done. Just the kind of spiritual aspect of it just kind of bogged it down for me. And I don't think that's a flaw of the writing. I just think that's something that's just not for me, and that's cool. So thank you again to Nick Alley and the publisher for the e-arc. I really appreciate it.